Nobody noticed Danny Reeves until things went wrong. That was fine with him. He sat in the back row of the training cruiser's briefing room. Watching 46 other cadets laugh and chat like this was just another day. To them, it was the Wayward Light was an old ship used by the Galactic Naval Academy for training exercises. Today's lesson was supposed to be simple. Survive a fake crisis. Follow orders. Don't panic. Easy stuff for cadets who had studied emergency protocols for 3 years. Danny had only been at the academy for 11 months. Before that, he hauled cargo across the outer colonies. Dangerous work. Lonely work. The kind of work that taught you to read a room and trust your gut. Right now, his gut was telling him something was off. Senior Instructor Palax stood at the front, his insectoid body towering over the seated cadets. The Morvani species lived for centuries and spent most of that time fighting wars. Palax had 200 years of combat experience. When he spoke, everyone listened. Today's simulation will test your response to cascading system failures, Palax announced. His voice clicked and buzzed through the translator. Cadet Leader Sorith will command. The rest of you will follow his orders exactly. Sorith stood and gave a confident nod. He was Draenei, an aquatic species known for their intelligence and calm under pressure. Top of the class in every subject. Perfect scores on every exam. The instructors loved him. Danny had worked with people like Sorith before. They were great when everything went according to plan. When it didn't, they fell apart. The simulation began 10 minutes later. Warning lights flashed red. The ship shuddered as fake explosions rocked the hull. Cadets scrambled to their stations, shouting readings and status reports. Sorith stood in the center, calling out orders from the textbook. Danny watched from his position near the rear bulkhead. He wasn't important enough to have a real station. His job was to observe and learn. So he observed. The first sign of trouble was the lights. In a simulation, the emergency lighting was steady and controlled. These lights flickered with real power surges, the kind that happened when actual systems were failing. The second sign was Palax. The old instructor received a message on his private communicator. His entire body went still. In 200 years of war, Palax had learned to hide his emotions. But Danny saw his hands tighten into fists. The third sign was the temperature. Simulations didn't affect life support, but the air was getting colder. Danny moved quietly toward Palax. Around him, cadets continued their fake emergency response, unaware that anything had changed. "Sir," Danny said softly, "this isn't a drill anymore, is it?" Palax looked down at him. For a long moment, the instructor said nothing. Then he gave a small nod. "The station has been attacked," Palax whispered. "Raiders have boarded this vessel. 20 or more. They disabled our communications and sealed us inside." Danny felt fear grip his chest. He pushed it down. Fear was useful, but only if you controlled it. What do they want? Hostages. 47 future military officers are worth a fortune in ransom. Palax paused. Or leverage. Do the other instructors know? I'm informing them now. We will retake the bridge and establish contact with the station. Danny looked at the cadets around him. Bright students. Good test scores. 0 real combat experience. And them, Palax hesitated. They will shelter in place until we secure the ship. It was a reasonable plan. Protect the students while the professionals handled the threat. By the book. Exactly what the academy taught. Danny nodded and stepped back. He wasn't a soldier. He was barely a cadet. This wasn't his fight. But as he watched Palax gather the other 2 instructors and head toward the bridge, that feeling in his gut grew stronger. Something was about to go very wrong. He was right. 15 minutes later, Palax stumbled back into the briefing room. Green blood leaked from a wound in his side. His left arm hung limp. Behind him, the corridor was empty. "The bridge is lost," Palax gasped. Instructors Varen and Koss had been captured. The room went silent. 46 cadets stared at their wounded teacher, waiting for him to tell them what to do. Palax looked at Sorith. "Cadet leader, you have command." Sorith's face went pale. His mouth opened, but no words came out. His hands started to shake. Danny watched from the back of the room. Around him, cadets began to whisper, then argue, then panic. Some wanted to surrender. Some wanted to hide. Some just wanted to cry. And in the middle of it all, Sora stood frozen, his perfect training completely useless. Danny closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He thought about his years on cargo ships, dealing with pirates and raiders and desperate people with guns. He thought about every time he had been scared and every time he had survived anyway. Then he opened his eyes and started counting. How many raiders? Where were they positioned? What weapons did they have? What did the ship's layout look like? He didn't have answers yet, but he would find them, because someone had to. 3 cadets tried to run for the emergency pods in the first 5 minutes. The raiders caught them before they reached the corridor's end. Danny heard the screams through the ventilation system. Short, sharp, then silence. Not dead, he guessed. Just stunned. The raiders wanted hostages, not corpses. At least for now. The briefing room had become a cage of fear. Cadets huddled in groups, whispering prayers in a dozen different languages. Some sat alone, staring at nothing. A few had stopped moving entirely, their minds shutting down under pressure they had never been trained to handle. Sorith paced back and forth near the front, muttering to himself. His scales had gone from healthy blue to sickly gray. Every few seconds, he would start to give an order, then stop, then change his mind. We should barricade the doors, he said. Then, no, wait, we should contact the station. Then, maybe we should negotiate. Nobody followed his orders because he never finished giving them. Palax sat against the wall, pressing a torn piece of uniform against his wound. The old Morvani had seen worse injuries, but blood loss was blood loss. He needed medical attention soon, or he would die. There was no doctor among the cadets. The medical bay was on deck 3, behind enemy lines. Danny crouched beside him. How many raiders did you see? Palax looked at him with tired eyes. 20, perhaps more. Well-armed. Professional. What species? Mixed. Mostly Draenei and Karathi. Some I didn't recognize. Palax paused. Their leader is Draenei. Scarred face. Cold eyes. He knew exactly where to hit us. Inside job, Danny thought. Someone had given the raiders information about the Academy's defenses, the training schedule, the ship's layout. That meant the attack was planned carefully. These weren't desperate criminals. They were organized. How long until rescue? 6 hours minimum. The station's communication array was destroyed in the attack. They'll need to send a ship to the nearest relay point. 6 hours. Danny did the math in his head. 20 armed raiders. 47 scared cadets. 3 capture instructors. 1 wounded. No weapons. No backup. No plan. The odds were terrible. He had worked with worse. Danny stood and walked to the center of the room. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't demand attention. He simply asked a question. Has anyone actually counted them? The whispers stopped. Heads turned toward him. The raiders, Danny continued. Has anyone seen them? Counted their numbers? Noted their positions? Silence. I have, a small voice said. Brill, a Fenric cadet, raised her furry hand. Her species was small, barely reaching Danny's waist, but they had excellent hearing and eyesight. I was near the cargo bay when they boarded. I counted 19, maybe 20. Most went to the bridge. Some stayed to guard the corridors. What weapons? Pulse rifles. Stun grenades. One had something bigger. A heavy weapon. Danny nodded. Anyone else see anything? More hands went up. Asa, a crystalline Lithern whose body reflected light in strange patterns, had seen raiders near engineering. 2 Morvani cadets had spotted guards near the life support section. Piece by piece, Danny built a map in his head. He borrowed a data pad and sketched the ship's layout, marking every confirmed raider position. What are you doing? Sorth demanded. His voice cracked with frustration. You're not in command. I'm the cadet leader. Danny didn't look up from the data pad. Then lead. Sorth opened his mouth to respond, but couldn't find words. We can't fight them, a cadet said. We don't have weapons. We don't need to fight them, Danny replied. Not yet. First, we need to understand them. How many, where they are, what they want. Then we figure out how to survive until rescue arrives. Or we could surrender, another cadet suggested. They want hostages, right? If we cooperate, they won't hurt us. Danny finally looked up. His eyes were calm, but serious. Surrender is an option. But let me ask you something. What happens after they get what they want? Do they let us go? Or do they decide witnesses are too dangerous to leave alive? The room went quiet again. I'm not telling anyone what to do, Danny said. But I've dealt with raiders before. On cargo ships, at stations, in places the Academy doesn't teach you about. And I've learned one thing. He set down the data pad. Hope is not a strategy, but information is power. So let's start gathering information. Palax watched from a wall as cadets began to move. Not with confidence, but with purpose. They formed small groups. They shared what they had seen. They started to think instead of panic. The wounded instructor had trained soldiers for 80 years. He had seen officers rise and fall, heroes made and forgotten. He knew what leadership looked like. And right now, it wasn't coming from the cadet with the highest rank that IT was coming from the human nobody had noticed until things went wrong. The maintenance hatch was hidden behind a broken wall panel in the storage closet. Danny found it because he had spent years crawling through ships just like this one. Old cargo hauler trick, he explained to the 5 cadets crouched behind him. Designers always build emergency access routes, then forget to put them on the official maps. Insurance requirement from about 200 years ago. Never got removed. Brill, the small Fenric, peered into the dark tunnel. Where does it lead? If I'm reading the ship right, auxiliary engineering. Secondary systems control. Not as important as the main bridge, but it has access to internal sensors and environmental controls. The raiders won't be guarding it. They're guarding the obvious targets. Bridge, main engineering, weapons systems. This, Danny shrugged. Backup equipment. Boring stuff. Nobody thinks about boring stuff. 20 minutes later, they had control of auxiliary engineering. The room was small and cramped, filled with old equipment that hummed quietly. But when Danny activated the internal sensors, a map of the entire ship appeared on the dusty screen, 23 red dots. Raiders, scattered across 4 decks. 12 blue dots. Hostages on the bridge, including 2 instructors. 23, Danny muttered. Not 20, and they're spread thin. Asa, the Lithern cadet, studied the screen. Her crystalline body pulsed with soft light. The bridge has 8 guards. Main engineering has 6. The rest are patrolling corridors. Patrol routes. Random. No clear pattern. Smart, Danny thought. Random patrols were harder to predict, harder to avoid. But they were also harder to coordinate. If the raiders couldn't communicate quickly, their randomness became a weakness. He pulled up the communication logs. The raiders were using encrypted short-range radios. Nothing fancy. Standard criminal gear. Can you jam their frequencies? He asked Asa. Perhaps, but they would know immediately. They would switch to backup channels. Not jam. Just listen. Can you tap into their communications without them knowing? Asa considered this. Yes, I believe so. Do it. While Asa worked on the communications, Danny sent the other cadets back through the maintenance tunnels with instructions. Gather everyone who can move. Separate them into 3 groups. Fighters, fixers, and those who need to stay hidden. An hour later, Danny had an army. It wasn't much of an army. 31 cadets, most of them terrified, none of them armed. But they were organized. They had roles. They had hope. Sorith appeared at the auxiliary engineering hatch, his face tight with anger. This is against regulations, he said. You're not authorized to take command. You're not even authorized to leave the briefing room. Danny didn't stop working on the sensor display. You're right. I'm not authorized. Then stop. Let me handle this. Okay. Danny stepped back from the console. Handle it. Sorith stared at the screen, full of red dots. His hands trembled slightly. We need to. He couldn't finish the sentence. Danny waited. He gave Sorith every chance to step up, to be the leader his rank said he was. But the words never came. Rescue is 5 hours away, Danny said quietly. The raiders will start getting nervous in 2. Nervous people make bad decisions. When they realize we're not just hiding and crying, they'll want to remind us who's in charge. How? By hurting someone. Making an example. Danny's voice was flat and calm. They'll pick a hostage, maybe an instructor, maybe a cadet, and they'll do something terrible where everyone can see. Sorith's face went pale. We can't stop them with force, Danny continued. We don't have the weapons or the training. But we can make this ship a nightmare for them. We can make them regret ever setting foot on the wayward light. From the doorway, Palak spoke. The wounded instructor had been carried to auxiliary engineering by 2 cadets. He looked weak but alert. Cadet Reeves. His voice was formal. I am transferring tactical command to you. Effective immediately. Danny turned. Sir, I'm not qualified. Qualification is a word invented by people who have never faced real danger. Palak's insectoid eyes were steady. I have watched soldiers for 2 centuries. I know what command looks like. You have it. Take it. The room went silent. Every cadet stared at Danny, waiting that he didn't want this. He had never wanted this. Command meant responsibility. It meant other people's lives depending on his choices. It meant carrying the weight of failure, but someone had to carry it. Danny turned back to the console. Brill, I need you to map every maintenance tunnel on this ship. Asa, keep listening to their communications. Everyone else, get ready to move. Move where? Someone asked. Danny looked at the red dots on the screen. 23 raiders. Confident. Armed. Thinking they had already won. Everywhere, he said. We're going to make them afraid of the dark. The first raider disappeared at 14:32 ship time. He was guarding a corridor on Deck 4 alone, bored, thinking about how easy this job had been. Then the lights went out. Just his section. Just for 30 seconds. When they came back on, he was unconscious on the floor, his weapon gone, his hands tied with cable wire. Nobody saw who did it. Nobody heard anything. The other raiders found him 10 minutes later, confused and terrified. That was how Danny wanted it. Psychological warfare. He explained to his team in auxiliary engineering. We can't beat them in a straight fight, but we don't need to. We just need to make them scared, tired, and paranoid. Scared people make mistakes. Over the next 2 hours, the cadets became ghosts. Asa monitored raider communications, feeding Danny every order, every complaint, every moment of confusion. When the raiders sent teams to investigate one area, Danny's people hid another. When they bunched up for safety, the cadets spread out. When they spread out, the cadets picked them off one by one. The environmental controls became weapons. Danny had cadets in engineering cycle the temperature in raider-controlled areas. Hot, then cold, then hot again. Never enough to cause real harm, but enough to make them miserable. Enough to keep them awake and uncomfortable. The ventilation system carried sounds from one part of the ship to another. Danny used it to broadcast the raiders' own captured conversations back to them with slight delays. Suddenly, they heard their own voices echoing from walls, giving orders they never gave. They started suspecting each other. Arguments broke out. By hour 3, the raiders had lost 6 of their people. Not killed, just removed, stunned, tied up, hidden in places they would never think to look. Voss, the raider leader, was losing his mind. Danny listened through Asa's communication tab as Voss screamed at his remaining soldiers. It's a training ship. They're students. How are you losing to students? No one had an answer, but victory came with a price. The first cadet injury happened during a failed ambush on Deck 2. A Morvani cadet named Krell moved too slowly. A raider spotted her. The pulse rifle caught her in the leg, and she went down hard. Her team dragged her back to safety, but the damage was done. Krell would survive, but she couldn't walk. Danny looked at her lying on the floor of auxiliary engineering, her leg wrapped in emergency bandages, her face tight with pain. This was his fault, his plan, his responsibility. Keep going, Krell said through gritted teeth. Don't stop because of me. He nodded, but the weight settled deeper into his chest. The second casualty was worse. Voss decided to make an example. He dragged one of the captured instructors, an elderly Karathi named Varen, to the center of the bridge. Then he broadcast a message to the entire ship. Whoever is leading this little rebellion, listen carefully. For every one of my soldiers you take, I will hurt one of your teachers. You have 5 minutes to surrender, or this one loses an arm. Danny's team looked at him, waiting for orders. Surrender? Fight? Run? 5 minutes. Not enough time to reach the bridge. Not enough time to plan a rescue. Not enough time for anything. Danny grabbed the ship's intercom. Don't hurt him, he said. I'm coming out. Alone. Let's talk. Asa grabbed his arm. That's suicide. Maybe. But I need to buy time. Danny looked at Brill. When I start talking, take your fastest team through the ventilation shaft near the bridge. There's an access point behind the main console. If things go wrong, at least try to get the hostages out. He walked out before anyone could stop him. The corridor was cold and dark. Raiders had shot out most of the lights in frustration. Danny walked slowly, hands raised, heart pounding. Voss met him halfway, surrounded by 4 armed guards. The Draenei leader was bigger than expected, his scales covered in old scars, his eyes filled with hate. You're the one causing all this trouble. Voss laughed. A human? I've killed dozens of your kind. You all bleed the same. Probably, Danny agreed. But here's the thing about humans. We don't stop, even when we should, even when it's stupid. We just keep going until there's nothing left. Brave words for a dead man. Maybe. But while we've been talking, my people have been moving. You're down to 17 soldiers now. How many more can you afford to lose? Voss's eyes widened. He turned to his guards. Check the corridors. Now, in that moment of distraction, a small shape dropped from the ceiling vent behind the guards. Brill. She moved like lightning, jamming a makeshift stunner into the nearest raider before anyone could react. Then chaos erupted. And in the chaos, Danny smiled. Brill moved like something out of a nightmare. The Fenric were small, but they were fast, and in close quarters, speed mattered more than size. She took down 2 raiders before they could raise their weapons. A third managed to fire, but his shot went wide, burning a hole in the ceiling. Danny tackled him from behind, driving him to the ground. Voss ran. The raider leader abandoned his soldiers and sprinted toward the bridge, screaming into his radio for backup. Let him go, Danny shouted to his team. Secure these 4, then fall back to position. The whole fight lasted less than a minute. 4 raiders captured, 2 more on the run. But the element of surprise was gone now. Voss knew exactly who he was dealing with, and he was angry. Danny retreated through the maintenance tunnels while Asa fed him updates through the communicator. Voss had pulled all his remaining soldiers back to the bridge. 11 raiders, plus the leader, guarding 12 hostages. They had sealed the doors and activated the emergency barriers. The bridge had become a fortress. He's panicking, Asa reported. The communications are chaotic. They're arguing about what to do. Some want to execute hostages. Some want to negotiate. Voss keeps changing his mind. How long until rescue? 2 hours. Too long. Voss was unstable. The more pressure Danny applied, the more likely he was to do something terrible. But backing off now would give the raiders time to regroup. There was only one option left. Take the bridge. Danny gathered his team in auxiliary engineering. Brill was bandaging a cut on her arm. 2 more Vani cadets were catching their breath. Asa's crystalline body flickered with stress. The bridge has one weakness, Danny said, pointing at the schematic on the screen. Ceiling access panel. Maintenance route for the life support conduits. It's narrow. Really narrow. Only someone small could fit through. Everyone looked at Brill. The Fenric swallowed hard. How small? Small enough that I'd have to crawl on my stomach. And I'm thinner than you. Then you're going alone? Danny nodded. I get inside. I access the emergency environmental controls from the bridge console. Then I reduce the oxygen in the room. Not enough to kill anyone, but enough to make them pass out. While they're down, you come through the main door and secure the hostages. What if they catch you before you reach the console? Then you'll have to improvise. The maintenance shaft was worse than Danny expected. Tight, dark, full of cables and pipes that scraped against his back as he crawled. Every few meters, he had to stop and squeeze through gaps that barely fit his shoulders. Halfway through, he paused to catch his breath. The darkness pressed down on him like a weight. For a moment, he thought about everyone depending on him. The cadets, the hostages, Palax bleeding out in auxiliary engineering, Krell with her ruined leg, Brill, who had followed him into danger without hesitation, that if he failed, they all suffered. The weight was crushing. But he had carried weight before. On cargo ships, in pirate attacks, in moments when giving up would have been easier than going on. Humans didn't stop. That was the one thing Danny knew for certain about his species. They weren't the strongest or the fastest or the smartest. But they didn't stop. He kept crawling. The ceiling panel above the bridge was secured with magnetic locks. Danny had a bypass tool, stolen from a raider during one of the earlier ambushes. It took 3 tries to get the panel open without making noise. Below him, he could see the bridge. 11 raiders spread across the room. 12 hostages kneeling against the far wall. Voss stood at the captain's chair, his weapon pointed at Instructor Varen's head. "No more games," Voss was saying. "When I find whoever's been doing this, I'll make them watch while I kill everyone they tried to save." Danny didn't have time to reach the environmental console. Voss was seconds away from pulling the trigger. He grabbed his communicator. "Voss!" The raider leader spun around, looking for the source of the voice. "I'm in the ceiling," Danny said. "Look up." Voss looked. His eyes met Danny's through the open panel. "You have 2 choices," Danny continued. "Surrender now, and you face a military tribunal. Clean, legal. You might even survive. Or I trigger the emergency containment protocol. The bridge seals. Life support drops to 40%. Everyone in this room, including your soldiers, passes out in about 90 seconds. Then my people come in and take you while you're sleeping." Voss laughed. "You knock out your own people? Your precious hostages. They'll wake up with headaches. You'll wake up in chains. Seems like a fair trade." "You're bluffing." Danny reached for the emergency panel beside him. "I was hoping you'd say that." He entered the code. The bridge went dark. Air vents hissed as oxygen levels dropped. Raiders stumbled, gasping, reaching for walls that weren't there. Hostages slumped against each other. Voss tried to raise his weapon, but his hands wouldn't cooperate. He fell to his knees, then to the floor. Danny dropped from the ceiling, landing hard on the command console. His vision was blurring at the edges, but he had about 30 seconds of consciousness left. He used 15 of them to reach the door controls. The bridge opened. Cadets poured in. Danny smiled as darkness took him. Danny woke up in a medical bay that smelled like antiseptic and something vaguely floral. His head felt like someone had filled it with rocks and then shaken it hard. "He's awake," a familiar voice said. Brill was sitting on a chair beside his bed, her furry face tired but relieved. "How long was I out?" "6 hours. The doctor said you push yourself too hard. Something about human adrenaline limits." She tilted her head. "You're a strange species." Danny tried to sit up. His body complained loudly. "The hostages? All safe. Some headaches, like you said. Nothing serious. The raiders? 23 captured, including Voss." He woke up screaming about vengeance. The security officers found it amusing. Danny closed his eyes and let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. It was over. They had won. "There'd a lot of people waiting to talk to you," Brill continued. "Admirals, mostly. They arrived with the rescue fleet, and they've been asking questions ever since." "Great. My favorite thing. Admirals." The inquiry lasted 3 days. Danny sat in a cold room on Station Horizon 7 while senior officers from 4 different species asked him to explain his decisions. "Why did you take command? Why did you ignore standard protocols? Why did you risk the lives of hostages with your environmental attack?" He answered honestly. He hadn't wanted command. He had simply done what needed to be done when nobody else would do it. Standard protocols were written by people who had never been in a real crisis. And the hostages would have died anyway if he hadn't acted. Some admirals nodded. Others frowned. A few looked at him like he was something they had never seen before. On the 3rd day, Palax testified. The old Morvani had recovered enough to stand, though he still moved slowly. He faced the inquiry board with the confidence of someone who had outlived most of his critics. "I transferred command to Cadet Reeves because he was the only person capable of leading us through that crisis," Palax said. "Rank is a system we invented for convenience. Survival is not convenient. It demands the right person at the right time, regardless of what their uniform says." "And you believe Cadet Reeves was the right person?" an admiral asked. Palax's insectoid eyes swept across the room. "I have trained soldiers for 200 years. I have seen heroes rise and cowards fall. I have watched civilizations burn and empires crumble. And in all that time, I have learned one truth." He paused. "Leadership cannot be taught. It can only be recognized. Cadet Reeves had it. I recognized it. My only regret is that I didn't see it sooner. The inquiry found Danny not guilty of any wrongdoing. More than that, they recommended him for immediate promotion and offered him a teaching position at the academy. He turned it down. Admiral Crescia, the senior Morvani commander who had led the rescue fleet, called him into her office afterward. She was ancient even by Morvani standards, her exoskeleton marked with centuries of battle scars. "You don't want to be a teacher," she said. It wasn't a question. "No, ma'am." "What do you want?" Danny thought about it. He thought about the cargo ships he had worked on, the lonely routes between stations, the dangerous jobs nobody else wanted. "I want to keep people alive," he said finally. "I'm not a hero. I'm not even a very good soldier. But I know how to survive, and I know how to help others survive. That's all I'm good at." Crescia studied him for a long moment. Then she handed him a data pad. Patrol vessel designation, steady hand. Small crew, frontier routes. Not prestigious, not glamorous, but essential. Her eyes met his. "The crew requested you specifically." Apparently, word spreads fast. Danny looked at the datapad. A small ship, a mixed crew of species who had heard what he did and wanted to serve with him anyway. That IT was perfect. 1 year later, the steady hand drifted through the outer reaches of explored space. Danny stood on the small bridge, watching stars slide past the viewport. Brill sat at the communications console behind him. She had graduated early, citing Danny's influence as her reason for choosing Frontier Patrol over a comfortable posting at a core world. "There's a distress signal coming in," she said. "Mining colony near the border. Pirate attack. Local security can't handle it." Danny turned to his crew. A Morvani engineer, a Lithern medic, 2 human gunners who had transferred from much bigger ships because they wanted to serve under him. "How far?" "For hours at full speed." He smiled. It was small and tired, but real. "Set course. Let's go keep some people alive." As the steady hand jumped to faster-than-light speed, Brill looked up from her console. "The humans have a saying about still waters," she said. "I never understood it until I met you." Danny raised an eyebrow. "Still waters run deep?" "Yes, that one." She shook her head, her fur rippling with something like wonder. "Your species hides so much beneath the surface. It's terrifying and beautiful." Danny didn't have an answer for that. So he just watched the stars and prepared for whatever came next. Because that was what humans did. They kept going, even when they shouldn't. Even when it was impossible. They just kept going.